ribs, how do you like them? Do you like them with just a little bit of bite like they do in the competitions? Or do you like them fall off the bone? My guess is most of you would rather have them fall off the bone if we're talking about eating them. However, if you have any experience, knowledge, or if you've ever been to a barbecue contest, judges like to see a bite mark when they bite into that rib. They want to see their teeth marks in that rib. My question is why? And I don't know, Let us know down in the comments below if you have any idea why judges at barbecue competitions want that bite, that structure. But this is Delmarva Backyard, and I'm gonna assume most of you would prefer your ribs fall off the bone. Most consumer marketing, when they're trying to, sell the fact that they have ribs, call them fall off the bone ribs. And that's for a reason. My guess is that competitions and judges prefer that bite mark so that they can pick the rib up and eat it that way, as compared to it falling off the bone and you having to pick it up off the plate or eat it with a fork or something like that. Here in the backyard, we're doing fall off the bone ribs today, and I'm gonna give you some tips on how to make sure your ribs are absolutely perfect. Also gonna give you a unique flavor on these ribs that you can do easily at home, and I guarantee you, your guests are going to be absolutely astonished at how great your ribs are if you cook them like this. So since we're doing some basic backyard fall off the bone ribs, I'm gonna start with some basic grocery store ribs. I was fortunate enough to find these thaw, although that doesn't mean they're fresh. In fact, most all ribs are frozen unless you get them from a special source. But the first thing I like to do with my ribs is go ahead, get them out of the pack, and then trim off all the little pieces, the little things that are gonna burn, shape them up on the sides, and then I usually cut about a rib off each end just to make sure I have even cooking and no burning. The next thing I do is rip off the membrane, and the membrane can be a little more tricky on spare ribs as compared to baby backs, but still wiggle your finger under there and you can pull it right off. Now I'm going with Duke's Mayo as a binder, and I'll tell you why. I'm not a big fan of binders, but going with a mayo binder, and specifically Duke's, because it's a very mild flavor, but it allows me to get lots of rub on these ribs, which you want. You want lots of rub, lots of flavor, and this way I don't have any dry spots during the cooking process, or not many anyway. Dry spots are usually not good for the rib cooking process, and I'll show you more about that later. I'm using Meat Church's Honey Hog, and I think this just has a wonderful, wonderful flavor, and it's gonna go well together with the sauce that I'm gonna make later. Stay tuned for that. Season them heavily on the bottom first. That way when I flip them and season the top, I'm not gonna mess up the appearance of that rub on top. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know this is a new grill in the lineup, and that's because I've purchased a new home and moved, and I have a new backyard, so I'll have more on that coming up. But the Traeger came with it, and I'll have more on it coming up. But we're going with some charcoal pellets, and we're gonna cook at 275 degrees after letting these ribs sweat it out. And by sweat it out, I mean after you leave them in the refrigerator for about an hour to 2 hours, you see little puddles of sweat just from that process of basically dry brining with the salts. On the grill these ribs go, bone side down. Lid down and not paying any attention to them. Got them on about 1:30, so come back. It's only been a half an hour, and you can see we're already making some wonderful progress. I was talking about those dry spots. Now, what I do about those dry spots, if I see any dry spots or spots that are becoming dry at all, I spritz it with apple cider vinegar while it's cooking. I just find it makes for a much better bark in the end. Now, when these ribs get to the color I'm looking for, and that's all preference, I go ahead and lay a stick of butter out in some foil, top it with a half cup of brown sugar, and then I use 1 small can of pineapple juice. And if you haven't seen my steak tenderizing video, it has pineapple in it. Pineapple is a absolutely perfect meat tenderizer. Doesn't taste like pineapple, but it gives it a special touch. Before I rewrap these ribs, I want to hit them with a little bit of Bearded Butcher's Brock Lesnar rub.
I love the way this spice complements the rest of these flavors. Get that on there, rewrap them, making sure not to put any holes in the foil, and get them back on the pit. Almost 4 hours into this cook, and I'm taking a peek, and it's a good thing I did. They're coming along really fast. Sometimes ribs can go a little faster or a little slower, and these today are definitely going a little faster than normal. So now is the important part. I want to go ahead and take the ribs out, and I'm going to flip them very, very carefully because they're already tender. In fact, you could pull them at this point in time if you were turning them in for a competition. But I'm going to use this really special sauce. It's so simple. You just bring these ingredients together, simmer them for a little bit, and you're ready to roll. Dump it on, leave about half for a second coating, but brush it on nice and even, put them back on the pit so it'll caramelize. And then about 15 minutes later, I'm gonna put another layer on, and we're gonna let it sit for another 15 minutes to let it caramelize. And then I'm pulling them off of the pit whenever they look perfect. And perfect is defined by you. They're already tender, but perfect. Beyond the perfect color, we're also looking at the tenderness, which I know is not a problem. They're probing at about 205 degrees, and you can just tell from the bone receding that they are going to be so fall off the bone and perfect. Let me show you.
I mean, it doesn't get any more fall off the bone than that. It's one of the best ribs I've ever had. It's so juicy. Those flavors just come together so nicely. You got a little bit of that vinegar on the back, sweetness on the front, and it doesn't get any more tender and juicy than this, my friends. Backyard fall off the bone ribs. Give them a shot.